Have you ever waited your whole life for something only to lose it in one moment? Not because you stopped believing, not because you abandoned God, but because in one moment of frustration, you disobeyed. Moses had faced Pharaoh. He had split the Red Sea. He had climbed the mountain of God. He had led millions through the wilderness. But there came a day when even Moses reached his limit, and one act of anger changed everything. The desert was unforgiving. Day after day, the heat pressed against the camp like fire from the sky. Dust filled the air. Children cried. Animals weakened. Water was running out. Again, the people gathered in frustration. Faces hardened. Voices rose. Fear spread through the camp. The same complaints Moses had heard for years returned once more. Why did you bring us here? Why did you lead us into this wilderness? Were there not enough graves in Egypt? The tension spread like wildfire. Everywhere Moses looked, he saw exhaustion, anger, bitterness, complaining. And beneath all of it, there was thirst, a dangerous thirst. The people were desperate. They could not survive much longer without water. Some blamed Moses, others blamed Aaron, others questioned God himself. The camp that had once celebrated miracles now echoed with accusation. Moses stood in the middle of it all, older now, tired, carrying years of pressure, years of rebellion, years of complaints. And on this day, something inside him began to crack. Moses and Aaron walked away from the crowd, not toward the people, toward the presence of God. They fell face down before the Lord, and once again, God answered. The glory of the Lord appeared, radiant, overwhelming, holy. Then God spoke clearly. Take the staff, gather the people, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will pour out water. The instruction was simple, not complicated, not unclear. Speak. That was all. Years earlier, God had once commanded Moses to strike a rock, and water had come forth. But this time was different. This time God said, "Speak." Moses rose slowly, the staff in his hand, the weight of leadership on his shoulders. The people gathered around, thousands watching, waiting, complaining, demanding. And something changed in Moses. You could see it in his face, in the tension of his jaw, in the fire rising in his eyes. This was no longer only about water. Years of frustration had built up inside him. Years of disrespect. Years of rebellion. Years of carrying people who constantly turned against God. And now, all of it surfaced. Moses stood before the rock, the entire camp silent. Then he shouted, "Listen, you rebels! Must we bring you water out of this rock?" The words echoed through the wilderness. And then Moses lifted the staff, not once, twice. He struck the rock. The sound cracked through the desert, and suddenly water exploded outward. Rushing, pouring, overflowing. The people surged forward, drinking, shouting, relieved. From the outside, it looked successful. The miracle still happened. The people still received water. But something was wrong, very wrong, because God had not said strike. He said speak. And in that moment, Moses misrepresented God before the people. The anger of Moses overshadowed the holiness of God. The miracle came, but the obedience did not. Then came the words Moses never expected to hear. Because after all the years, after all the sacrifices, after all the faithfulness, God spoke with heartbreaking finality. Because you did not trust me enough, because you did not honor me as holy before the people, you will not bring this assembly into the land I have given them. The wilderness suddenly felt colder, heavier, silent. Moses heard the judgment, and deep down, he understood. One moment, one act, one decision, and the promised land would now be seen only from a distance. Can you imagine it? The man who confronted Pharaoh, the man who stretched out his staff over the Red Sea, the man who fasted on the mountain with God, the man who carried Israel through the wilderness, would not enter the land, not because God stopped loving him, but because holiness still mattered. That is the part many people struggle to understand. Moses was still chosen, still loved, still used by God, but leadership carried responsibility. The closer someone stands to the presence of God, the more serious obedience becomes. This was never only about hitting a rock. It was about trust, representation, reverence. God had told Moses to speak, but anger took control. Emotion replaced obedience, and in front of the people, Moses acted in a way that distorted the character of God. The people saw frustration, but God wanted them to see holiness. They saw anger, but God wanted them to see trust. And sometimes the greatest danger is not open rebellion. Sometimes it is spiritual frustration, slowly turning into careless obedience. Even faithful people can reach emotional exhaustion. Even strong leaders can become weary. Even those closest to God must guard their hearts, because one emotional moment can leave permanent consequences. The story of Moses striking the rock is uncomfortable, especially because Moses was not an evil man. He was one of the greatest leaders in Scripture, which means this story is not only a warning for rebellious people, it is also a warning for faithful people, for people who are tired, frustrated, exhausted, for people who still serve God externally, while anger quietly builds internally. Moses had spent years carrying pressure, and eventually that pressure surfaced in the wrong moment. That is why this story still speaks today, because many people know what it feels like to keep going while emotionally drained, to pray while exhausted, to lead while discouraged, to obey while frustrated. And if those emotions are not surrendered to God, they eventually erupt. One decision, one conversation, one emotional reaction, and damage can follow. Yet, even in judgment, God's mercy remained. God did not abandon Moses. He still spoke with him, still guided him, still allowed him to see the promised land from afar. And later, Moses would stand in glory during the transfiguration of Christ. But the consequence remained, because forgiveness does not always erase consequences. That truth is difficult, but it is real. Some moments cannot be taken back. Some words cannot be unheard. Some acts of disobedience leave lasting impact. That is why obedience matters even in emotional moments, especially in emotional moments. There are people today who love God, but are operating out of frustration. People still praying, but angry inside. Still serving, still leading, still showing up, but exhausted. And if that frustration is ignored long enough, it can eventually affect how they represent God to others. Moses lost sight of reverence for one moment, and it cost him entrance into the land he had waited his whole life to reach. The tragedy of this story is not that Moses failed. The tragedy is how close he was. So close. After all the miracles, after all the wilderness, after all the years, the promised land stood ahead, and yet he would not cross over. Because obedience still matters. Not partial obedience, not emotional obedience, not frustrated obedience, true obedience, the kind that trusts God completely, even when emotions rise, even when pressure builds, even when exhaustion sets in. The wilderness was watching Moses, and today, people are watching us too. How we respond under pressure matters. How we speak in frustration matters. How we represent God matters, especially when emotions are high. Moses struck the rock. But perhaps the deeper question is this: what happens when pressure strikes us? Does anger take over? Does pride rise? Do emotions replace obedience? Or do we still trust God enough to do exactly what He said? Because sometimes the greatest test of faith is not during miracles, it is during frustration. And in the silence of the wilderness, Moses learned a painful truth. One moment can change everything, but it can also warn generations to come. Obedience matters, even when we are tired, even when we are emotional, even when we do not understand, because God is still holy, and holiness still matters. The desert wind moves across the rocks. Far in the distance stands the promised land, close enough to see, but never to enter.